The Wolf and His Shadow. A wolf left his lair one evening in fine spirits and an excellent appetite. As he ran, the setting sun cast his shadow far out on the ground, and it looked as if the wolf were 100 times bigger than he really was. "Why," exclaimed the wolf proudly, "see how big I am. Fancy me running away from a puny lion. I'll show him who is fit to be king, he or I." Just then an immense shadow blotted him out entirely, and the next instant a lion struck him down with a single blow. The moral of the story is, do not let your fancy make you forget realities. The Owl and the Grasshopper. The owl always takes her sleep during the day. Then, after sundown, when the rosy light fades from the sky and the shadows rise slowly through the wood, out she comes ruffling and blinking from the old hollow tree. Now her weird "hoo, hoo, hoo" echoes through the quiet forest, and she begins her hunt for bugs and beetles, frogs and mice she likes so well to eat. Now there was a certain old owl who had become very cross and hard to please as she grew older, especially if anything disturbed her daily slumbers. One warm summer afternoon, as she dozed away in her den in the old oak tree, a grasshopper nearby began a joyous but very raspy song. Out popped the old owl's head from the opening in the tree that served her both for door and for window. "Get away from here," she said to the grasshopper. "Have you no manners? You should at least respect my age and leave me to sleep in quiet." But the grasshopper answered saucily that he had as much right to his place in the sun as the owl had to her place in the old oak tree. Then he struck up a louder and still more raspy tune. The wise old owl knew quite well it would do no good to argue with the grasshopper, nor with anybody else for that matter. Besides, her eyes were not sharp enough by day to permit her to punish the grasshopper as he deserved. So she laid aside all hard words and spoke very kindly to him. "Well, sir," she said, "if I must stay awake, I am going to settle right down to enjoy your singing. Now that I am thinking of it, I have a wonderful wine here, sent me from Olympus, of which I am told Apollo drinks before he sings to the high gods. Please come up and taste this delicious wine with me. I know it will make you sing like Apollo himself." The foolish grasshopper was taken in by the owl's flattering words. Up he jumped to the owl's den, but as soon as he was near enough so that the old owl could see him clearly, she pounced upon him and ate him up. The moral of the story is, flattery is not a proof of true admiration. Do not let flattery throw you off your guard against an enemy. The Frogs Who Wished for a King. The frogs were tired of governing themselves. They had so much freedom that it had spoiled them, and they did nothing but sit around croaking in a bored manner and wishing for a government that could entertain them with pomp and display of royalty, and rule them in a way to make them know that they were being ruled. No milk and water government for them, they declared. So they sent a petition to Jupiter asking for a king. Jupiter saw what simple and foolish creatures they were, but to keep them quiet and make them think they had a king, he threw down a huge log, which fell into the water with a great splash. The frogs hid themselves among the reeds and grasses, thinking the new king to be some fearful giant. But they soon discovered how tame and peaceable King Log was. In a short time, the younger frogs were using him for a diving platform, while the older frogs made him a meeting place where they complained loudly to Jupiter about the government. To teach the frogs a lesson, the ruler of the gods now sent a crane to be king of Frogland. The crane proved to be a very different sort of king from old King Log. He gobbled up the poor frogs right and left, and they soon saw what fools they had been. In mournful croaks they begged Jupiter to take away the cruel tyrant before they should all be destroyed. "How now?" cried Jupiter. "Are you not yet content? You have what you have asked for, and so you have only yourselves to blame for your misfortunes." The moral of the story is, be sure you can better your condition before you seek to change. The Crow and the Fox. A crow was sitting on a branch of a tree with a piece of cheese in her beak, when a fox observed her and set his wits to work to discover some way of getting the cheese. Coming and standing under the tree, he looked up and said, "What a noble bird I see above me! Her beauty is without equal, the hue of her plumage exquisite. If only her voice is as sweet as her looks are fair, she ought, without doubt, to be the queen of birds." The crow was hugely flattered by this, and just to show the fox that she could sing, she gave a loud caw. Down came the cheese, of course, and the fox, snatching it up, said, "You have a voice, madam, I see. What you want is wits." The Lion and the Arse. One day, as the lion walked proudly down a forest aisle, and the animals respectfully made way for him, an arse brayed a scornful remark as he passed. The lion felt a flash of anger, but when he turned his head and saw who had spoken, he walked quietly on. He would not honor the fool with even so much as a stroke of his claws. The moral of the story is, do not resent the remark of a fool. Ignore them. The Sheep and the Pig. One day a shepherd discovered a fat pig in the meadow where his sheep were pastured. He very quickly captured the porker, which squealed at the top of its voice the moment the shepherd laid hands on it. You would have thought to hear the loud squealing that the pig was being cruelly hurt. But in spite of its squeals and struggles to escape, the shepherd tucked his prize under his arm and started off to the butcher's in the marketplace. The sheep in the pasture were very much astonished and amused at the pig's behavior, and followed the shepherd and his charge to the pasture gate.
"What makes you squeal like that?"
asked one of the sheep.
"The shepherd often catches and carries one of us off, but we should be very much ashamed to make such a terrible fuss about it like you do."
"That is all very well," replied the pig, with a squeal and a frantic kick.
"But when he catches you, he's only after your wool, but he wants my bacon."
The moral of the story is, it is easy to be brave when there is no danger. The Travellers and the Purse. Two men were travelling in company along the road when one of them picked up a well-filled purse. "How lucky I am," he said. "I have found a purse. Judging by its weight, it must be full of gold."
"Do not say, 'I have found a purse,'" said his companion. "Say rather, 'We have found a purse, and how lucky we are.' Travellers ought to share alike the fortunes and misfortunes of the road."
"No, no," replied the other angrily. "I found it, and I am going to keep it." Just then they heard a shout of "Stop! Thief!" and looked around and saw a mob of people armed with clubs coming down the road. The man who had found the purse fell into a panic. "We are lost if they find the purse on us," he cried. "No, no," replied the other. "You would not say 'we' before, so now stick to your 'I.' Say 'I am lost.'" The moral of the story: we cannot expect anyone to share our misfortune unless we are willing to share our good fortune also. The Farmer and the Stork. A stork of a very simple and trusting nature had been asked by a gay party of cranes to visit a field that had been newly planted. But the party ended dismally with all the birds entangled in the meshes of the farmer's net. The stork begged the farmer to spare him.
"Please let me go," he pleaded. "I belong to the Stork family, who you know are honest and birds of good character. Besides, I did not know the cranes were going to steal."
"You may be a very good bird," answered the farmer, "but I caught you with the thieving cranes, and you will have to share the same punishment with them."
The moral of the story: you are judged by the company you keep. The Planetree. Two travelers walking in the noonday sun sought the shade of a wide-spreading tree to rest. As they lay looking up amongst the leaves, they saw it was a plane tree. "How useless is the plane tree," said one to the other. "It bears no fruit whatever, and only serves to litter the ground with leaves."
"Ungrateful creatures," said the voice from the plane tree. "You lie here in my cooling shade, and yet you say I'm useless? Thus ungratefully, O Jupiter, do men receive their blessings."
The moral of the story: our best blessings are often the least appreciated. The Gnat and the Bull. A gnat flew over the meadow with much buzzing for so small a creature, and settled on the tip of one of the horns of a bull. After he had rested a short time, he made ready to fly away, but before he left, he begged the bull's pardon for having used his horn for a resting place. "You must be very glad to have me go now," he said.
"It's all the same to me," replied the bull. "I did not even know you were there."
The moral of the story: we are often of greater importance in our own eyes than in the eyes of our neighbor. The smaller the mind, the greater the conceit. The Shepherd Boy and the Wolf. A shepherd boy tended his master's sheep near a dark forest, not far from the village. Soon he found life in the pasture very dull. All he could do to amuse himself was to talk to his dog and play on his shepherd's pipe. One day, as he sat watching the sheep and the quiet forest, and thinking what he would do should he see a wolf, he thought of a plan to amuse himself. His master had told him to call for help should a wolf attack the flock, and the villagers would drive it away. So now, though he had not seen anything that even looked like a wolf, he ran towards the village shouting at the top of his voice, "Wolf! Wolf!" As he expected, the villagers who heard the cry dropped their work and ran in great excitement to the pasture. But when they got there, they found the boy doubled up with laughter at the trick he had played on them. A few days later, the shepherd boy again shouted, "Wolf! Wolf!" Again, the villagers ran to help him, only to be laughed at again. Then one evening, as the sun was setting behind the forest and the shadows were creeping out over the pasture, a wolf really did spring from the underbrush and fall upon the sheep. In terror, the boy ran towards the village, shouting, "Wolf! Wolf!" But though the villagers heard the cry, they did not run to help him as they had before. "He cannot fool us again," they said. The wolf killed a great many of the boy's sheep and then slipped away into the forest. The moral of the story is: liars are not believed even when they speak the truth. The Lion and the Mouse. A lion lay asleep in the forest, his great head resting on his paws. A timid little mouse came upon him unexpectedly, and in her fright and haste to get away, ran across the lion's nose. Roused from his nap, the lion laid his huge paw angrily on the tiny creature to kill her. "Spare me," begged the mouse. "Please let me go, and someday I will surely repay you." The lion was much amused to think that a mouse could ever help him, but he was generous and finally let the mouse go. Some days later, when stalking his prey in the forest, the lion was caught in the toils of a hunter's net. Unable to free himself, He filled the forest with his angry roaring. The mouse knew the voice and quickly found the lion struggling in the net. Running to one of the great ropes that bound him, she gnawed it until it parted, and soon the lion was free. "You laughed when I said I could repay you," said the mouse. "Now you see that even a mouse can help a lion." The moral of the story is, a kindness is never wasted. The Oxen and the Wheels. A pair of oxen were drawing a heavily loaded wagon along a miry country road. They had to use all their strength to pull the wagon, but they did not complain. The wheels of the wagon were of a different sort. Though the task they had to do was very light compared with that of the oxen, they creaked and groaned at every turn. The poor oxen, pulling with all their might to draw the wagon through the deep mud, had their ears filled with the loud complaining of the wheels. And this, you may well know, made the work that much harder to endure. "Silence!" the oxen cried at last, out of patience. "What have you wheels to complain about so loudly? We were drawing all the weight, not you, and we were keeping still about it besides." The moral of the story: they complain most who suffer least. The Arse and his driver. An arse was being driven along a road leading down the mountainside, when he suddenly took it into his silly head to choose his own path. He could see his stall at the foot of the mountain, and to him the quickest way down seemed to be over the edge of the nearest cliff. But as he was about to leap over, his master caught him by the tail and tried to pull him back. But the stubborn arse would not yield and pulled with all his might. "Very well," said his master. "Go your way, you wilful beast, and see where it leads you." With that he let go, and the foolish arse tumbled head over heels down the side of the mountain. The moral of the story is, they who will not listen to reason, but stubbornly go their own way against the friendly advice of those who are wiser than they, are on the road to misfortune. The Wolf and the Crane. A wolf had been feasting too greedily, and a bone had stuck crosswise in his throat. He could get it neither up nor down, and of course he could not eat a thing. Naturally, that was an awful state of affairs for a greedy wolf. So away he hurried to the crane. He was sure that she, with her long neck and bill, would easily be able to reach the bone and pull it out. "I will reward you very handsomely," said the wolf, "if you pull that bone out for me." The crane, as you can imagine, was very uneasy about putting her head in a wolf's throat. But she was grasping in nature, so she did what the wolf asked her to do. When the wolf felt that the bone was gone, he started to walk away. "But what about my reward?" called the crane anxiously. "What?" snarled the wolf, whirling around. "Haven't you got it? Isn't it enough that I let you take your head out of my mouth without snapping it off?" The moral of the story: expect no reward for serving the wicked.